Sofia never planned for her life to change in the 10 seconds it took her to walk past the meeting room door, but that was how fast everything shifted. One moment she was carrying a tray of empty glasses back to the kitchen, trying not to think about the hospital bill waiting for her at home, and the next she heard her own name spoken by a stranger. She froze, partly out of instinct and partly out of confusion. She had been invisible for so long inside the Valeriano household that hearing her name spoken with weight made her stop breathing for a second. She shouldn't have stepped closer, but she did. Just enough to catch the voices clearly. Two men, both important enough that she recognized their names even though she'd never spoken to either, were standing by the open doorway. Their tones were low and confident, the kind of confidence that came with political purpose, not accidental gossip. "She works on this floor," one of them said. "If she overhears anything, she won't understand it." "That's what they said about the last one," the other replied. "If Marco comes to the summit without a partner again, our challenge will stand. His people know it. The other families know it. He has no emotional anchor. He's unstable." That word, unstable, stung even Sofia, and she wasn't the target of it. She'd heard the whispers too. Everyone inside the estate had. Marco Valeriano ruled without a wife, without a lover, without a public companion. He wasn't known for warmth or softness. He wasn't known for romance or partnership. He was known for control, precision, and an intimidating silence that made most people choose their words carefully around him. "He's alone," the man continued. "If the commission believes that, then weakening his position won't be difficult." Sofia's fingers tightened around the tray she was holding. She didn't intend to listen. She didn't intend to know anything. She simply turned too quickly and the edge of the tray tapped the door frame. The sound was soft, barely noticeable, but it was enough to make both men pause. One of them leaned out and caught sight of her retreating steps. "You," he said sharply. She stopped. Her pulse jumped. She turned slowly because running would only make things worse. The man stared at her with a suspicion she had done nothing to earn. "How long were you standing there?" "Just passing," she whispered. "I wasn't listening." His eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that?" "I'm working," she said quietly. "I was returning these to the kitchen." "Convenient answer," the second man said. "Exactly what a spy would say." Her stomach dropped. Those were dangerous words in this world and they both knew it. Being accused of spying, even by mistake, could ruin her, cost her job, cost her safety, cost her ability to provide for her sister. She opened her mouth, desperate to explain, but her voice came out shaky. "I didn't hear anything important." "Meaning you did hear something," one of them snapped. That was when fear pushed her into the worst decision she had ever made, or the best. She still hadn't decided. The words spilled out without thought, without strategy, without time to stop herself. "I wasn't spying," she blurted. "I'm the Don's mistress." Silence shattered the hallway instantly. A heavy, frozen, stunned silence. Both men stared at her. She felt her cheeks burn. She felt her breath slip out of her body entirely. She couldn't believe what she had just said, but the words were out and nothing in the world could pull them back. "You?" one of them asked, voice thick with disbelief. Before she could attempt another terrible excuse or collapse into the floor, another voice entered the room. Calm, controlled, familiar. "What's happening here?" Marco Valeriano stepped into the hallway. His presence alone was enough to shift the air. He didn't look at her first. He examined the two men as if measuring whether their expression matched anything dangerous. They stepped back a little, not out of fear but out of respect. "Your maid," the first man began, "is wandering around places she shouldn't. She appears to know things she shouldn't know." Sofia swallowed. Her heart beat so loudly she wondered if Marco could hear it. "She claims," the second man added, "that she is your mistress." Marco turned his eyes to her then. Not angry. Not surprised. Just calculating. The way he assessed any situation that reached him through other people's mouths. He wanted to take the words back. She wanted the hallway to swallow her whole. She wanted to explain that she panicked, that she didn't mean it, that she had only been trying to protect herself. I didn't want trouble," she whispered. Marco stepped closer. His gaze didn't soften, but it sharpened in a way that made her realize he was putting pieces together in real time. Her lie wasn't convenient for her, but it was for him. A mistress solved the very problem his rivals had planned to use against him. A private partner signaled stability. It silenced rumors. It closed the cracks the others were trying to widen. He understood that faster than she did. He didn't ask her why she said it, didn't question her motives. Instead, he placed his hand at the small of her back in a way that felt both unfamiliar and grounding. "She isn't lying," he said with a calm, steady confidence. "She's mine." The words made the two men stiffen. Her heart nearly tripped over itself. She felt his hand, warm but firm, supporting her silently. Marco didn't elaborate. He didn't give the men any explanation to poke at. He simply dismissed them with one look and they stepped away, forced to pretend they believed him. When they were gone, Marco lifted his hand and took a breath as if choosing his next words carefully. "Would you like to tell me why you said that?" he asked. Sofia lowered her eyes. "I panicked. They thought I was listening." "Were you?" "Not on purpose." He studied her again, quieter this time. "Come with me." She followed him to his office, still trembling. He closed the door behind them and gestured for her to sit, though she didn't. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed lightly. "You saved yourself with that lie," he said. "But you also saved me." She looked up, confused. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said. "But the timing benefits us both." Then he added plainly, "I need a partner for the summit. Someone believable. Someone I trust not to play their own games. Your lie gives us an advantage." Sofia's throat tightened. "Are you saying?" "I'm offering you a deal," he said. "Pretend to be my mistress until the summit ends. In return, your sister's medical bills disappear. Permanently." Her breath caught. "You'll also receive a private room, double pay and protection. And after the summit, you may return to your normal life if you want." She hesitated, not because she didn't want the help, but because the idea of pretending to belong to Marco Valeriano felt overwhelming. Not frightening exactly, but serious. Heavy. Real in ways she didn't understand. "I'm not used to attention," she admitted. "Or pretending." "I don't need a performance," Marco replied. "Just presence." Her fingers tightened at her side. She nodded slowly. "I'll do it." Marco's expression didn't show satisfaction, but something more subtle. Agreement. Decision. Closure. "Good," he said. "Then we begin tonight." He stepped toward the door, but before he opened it, his eyes moved to hers again, steady and unreadable. "You did well today, Sofia." When he walked away, she stayed in the office a little longer, trying to calm her heartbeat. Sofia expected the evening to be a blur she wouldn't handle well, but she didn't expect Marco to walk into the staff quarters personally. Everyone working on the third floor stopped when they saw him. He didn't raise his voice or look impatient, he didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to silence the entire hallway. Sofia stepped out of her room slowly, still unsure if she belonged in his line of sight. "You're ready?" he asked. She nodded, though she wasn't sure she was. She had brushed her hair, changed her clothes, and tried not to overthink every possible mistake she could make. She wore a simple black dress he had sent earlier through one of the housekeepers. It wasn't revealing or flashy, but it fit her in a way that made her feel aware of herself. Marco looked at her for a moment, not with admiration or judgment, but with the same steady assessment he used on people who mattered to him professionally. Then he gave a brief nod, as though confirming she met a standard she didn't know she was being measured against. "Follow me," he said. She walked beside him, though a little behind, unsure of her place. He slowed his steps slightly, making it easier for her to keep up. He didn't make a comment about it, he simply adjusted. The estate's grand hall was already being set up for the pre-summit dinner. Workers moved around with purpose, placing long tables, polished glassware, and subtle floral arrangements. Everything looked clean and sharp without being extravagant. Marco didn't look at any of it. His attention was on her, noticing what she noticed. "You'll sit at my right," he said. "You don't have to speak unless you feel comfortable. You don't have to pretend affection. You only need to be close enough for it to look natural." She nodded. "I can do that." "You don't need to force confidence," he added. "Just exist near me. That's enough." Somehow that eased her shoulders. When they reached the entrance to the hall, a few men from another family were already waiting. They turned when they saw Marco and then glanced at her. She felt their curiosity sweep across her like a draft. They had never seen her before, not in this context. One of them raised an eyebrow. You never bring company, Valeriano. This time is different, Marco replied, his tone level. Sofia felt a small firmness at her lower back, his hand again guiding her gently but clearly. The gesture wasn't possessive or dramatic. It just told anyone watching exactly where she stood. The whispering began almost immediately. Quiet comments, curious glances, subtle calculations from every corner of the room. Sofia had been background noise her entire life in this place. People walked past her, spoke around her, forgot her existence. Now they looked at her with interest because Marco had defined her position with one sentence and one touch. They found their seats at the long table. Sofia sat where he told her, her hands resting in her lap to keep from fidgeting. Marco remained composed beside her, answering greetings with small nods. He didn't drink, didn't slouch, didn't appear distracted. He operated like a man who needed nothing. You don't have to imitate anyone here, he murmured to her. Just be at ease. She breathed slowly. Trying. He glanced at her, and though his face didn't warm visibly, there was something almost gentle in the way he lowered his voice. You're doing fine. The dinner began with formal discussions. Nothing emotional, nothing chaotic, just measured exchanges about logistics, supply chains, and agreements. Sofia didn't understand every detail, but she understood the atmosphere. She could feel that everyone in the room was observing Marco's dynamics with her. Not because they cared about romance, but because they cared about what it meant for power. Halfway through the meal, a man named Lorenzo stepped closer to their side of the table. He was from a smaller family, known for inserting himself where he didn't belong. He leaned a little too close to Sofia and smiled as if testing boundaries. So you're the one who finally tamed him, Lorenzo said, shifting his gaze between her and Marco. Interesting choice. Sofia didn't answer. He looked at Marco. Marco didn't raise his voice. Stay where you are, Lorenzo. Lorenzo let out a soft huff, amused rather than offended. Relax. I'm only asking your lady a friendly question. She doesn't need friendly questions from you. Lorenzo's eyebrows lifted. You're protective. I almost thought you brought her as decoration. But perhaps she matters more than she looks. Sofia felt the tension rise, not between Lorenzo and her but between Lorenzo and Marco. She expected Marco to stand or confront him directly, but he didn't. He simply placed one hand around his glass and said with a calm that cut deeper than anger. You're talking too much. The entire table quieted. Lorenzo stepped back not because he was scared, but because he recognized a line he shouldn't cross. When the dinner ended and people slowly dispersed, Sofia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marco stood and offered his hand, not in a romantic gesture, but in a quiet way of telling her she didn't have to walk out alone. You handled that well, he said once they were in the hallway. I didn't do anything. You stayed calm. That's more than most people manage in a room like that. She didn't know how to respond to that. Praise wasn't something she was used to, especially not from someone like him. Marco walked her back toward the quieter part of the estate. The conversation that followed surprised her because it felt less like orders and more like an actual exchange. How long have you worked here? He asked. 2 years. And no one has noticed you until today. She gave a small shrug. People see what they want to see. And what do you think they saw tonight? A problem, she said honestly. Or a weakness. He stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. Is that what you think you are to me? She didn't know what to answer, so she stayed quiet. Marco shook his head once. You're an asset. A fortunate one, given the circumstances. She accepted the answer even if it left a strange feeling in her stomach. She wasn't used to mattering. Even temporarily. They reached her room door and she expected him to turn away. That he paused. I want you to move to the East Wing tomorrow, he said. The room next to mine. It will make the arrangement more believable. Her breath caught not in fear but in the weight of what that implied. Not closeness in the romantic sense. Just proximity that others would interpret however they wanted. I understand, she murmured. He studied her face for a moment, perhaps checking if she was overwhelmed. Then he added, if anything becomes uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. She nodded. Good night, Sofia. Good night. She entered her room and only when the door closed did her body finally relax. She had never been so aware of every movement, every glance, every word. And yet none of it felt as threatening as she once imagined his world would. Marco wasn't gentle, but he wasn't reckless with her. He wasn't cold, but he wasn't soft. He existed in a space she didn't know how to name yet. Steady, controlled, and unexpectedly attentive to detail. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands still trembling slightly. Everything about her day had shifted. Everything about her position had changed. And she knew, without needing anyone to say it out loud, that the summit was only the beginning of what she had stepped into. Sofia kept replaying the evening over and over. How Marco had observed her, how calm he had been, and how easy it had been for him to command respect without raising his voice. She had thought she was stepping into a role she would only pretend to occupy, but she realized the line between pretending and reality was already thinner than she expected. The next morning, Marco appeared at her door without knocking. It wasn't a request, it was simply how things worked in his world. Sofia had learned that there was a rhythm to his presence, a certainty, and everything else adjusted around it. "You're ready for today?" he asked. She nodded. "I think so." "You look appropriate," he said, not complimentary, not warm, just observant. He studied her face for a moment longer than necessary, and she felt an unexpected awareness of herself. The dress she had chosen, the simple pearls, her hair tied neatly, it was ordinary. Yet with him looking at her it became something more. "Follow me," he said, and together they moved to the east wing, where she would now be staying temporarily. The rooms were modest compared to the main estate, but still more comfortable than any place she had lived. A small desk, clean sheets, a window that looked out over the garden. It was functional, but it carried the invisible weight of proximity. The summit that day was longer than the previous evening, filled with discussions, negotiations, and quiet calculations. Sofia stayed beside Marco just as she had been told. She wasn't required to speak, but she noticed that he glanced at her whenever decisions were being weighed, and occasionally he would quietly clarify a point just to her, speaking in a tone so low that no one else could hear. Sofia didn't know if he was testing her, sharing information, or simply noticing her. She decided not to question it. She simply listened, stayed close, and observed him. Over time she began to see the man behind the dawn. The habits, the way he considered everyone's reactions, the little pauses that hinted at thoughtfulness. It was during one of the final sessions of the summit that the pressure came. Not from violence, not from threats, but from expectation. Several of the elder family members leaned forward in their chairs, exchanging glances before speaking. "Don Valeriano," one of them said, Your companion here is charming, yes, but she is not of this world. She is neither from a powerful family nor connected to the commission. You understand what the perception is." Sofia stiffened beside him. She had feared this moment, though she had no idea how to respond. Marco didn't flinch. He didn't lower his eyes. He placed a hand lightly on hers, not for warmth but for grounding. His gesture was subtle, yet it carried a weight that everyone in the room noticed. "She is my choice," Marco said, his voice even. "Not for status, not for politics, not for image. She is my choice because I choose her." There was a pause. The room went quiet. Some of the elders exchanged surprised glances. Some leaned back, evaluating whether he was making a mistake. Sofia felt her stomach tighten, not because she feared the reaction, but because she hadn't expected him to say it aloud. To say it in front of everyone. She had expected the pretense to remain just that, a necessary performance. But it wasn't a performance anymore. After the summit, the day continued with small discussions, handshakes, and quiet exchanges. Marco and Sofia moved through the rooms together, side by side, and she realized how different it felt to be acknowledged, included, and observed in this way. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to him, and increasingly not to anyone else. When the evening came, they walked together to the quieter part of the estate. No one followed. No one watched. It was just the two of them, side by side, as they had walked through the summit rooms countless times over the past days. "You don't have to pretend with me anymore," Marco said once they were alone in the corridor. Sofia's heart skipped a beat. "No," he said, lifting a hand. "I mean it. You don't need to act. You don't need to think about what anyone expects. You only need to be yourself." She swallowed, trying to make her thoughts come out in a coherent sentence. I don't know what to say." "Then don't," he replied. He turned slightly to face her. You've surprised me more than anyone else ever has. In ways I didn't know I could be surprised. You understand me without me needing to explain. You just notice. You pay attention. She looked down, suddenly aware of how close he was. She had spent all her life trying not to stand out, trying not to make mistakes, trying to stay small. Yet here with him she felt seen, not judged, not analyzed, but seen. Marco, she said softly. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect to feel like this. He nodded slightly, understanding without interrupting. Then he stepped closer. The space between them was small but not uncomfortable. It was intentional, deliberate, and it made her chest tighten. I didn't plan for this either, he admitted. But I don't want it to end. Not for me. Not for us. Sofia took a deep breath. I don't want it to end either. There was a pause that neither of them rushed to fill. It was quiet, not tense, just settled. A quiet that spoke of understanding, of connection, of the recognition that the world outside these walls demanded appearances, negotiations, and distance. But that here, at least for this moment, none of that mattered. Then softly he leaned in and kissed her. Not a kiss meant to display power, not a kiss filled with urgency, just a kiss that was precise, measured, and real. She felt the intention behind it, the sincerity, and the acknowledgement that what had started as a pretense had grown into something neither of them could ignore. When they finally pulled apart, he didn't step back. He didn't release her hand. He simply looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, a mix of certainty and quiet satisfaction. You weren't supposed to matter, he said quietly, almost to himself. You were supposed to be convenient. A story for the others to see. But you, he paused, shaking his head slightly. You became the only truth I want. Sofia's eyes widened slightly, then softened. I never meant to, she admitted. But I do. He nodded, as if hearing exactly what he needed to hear. Good. Then we don't pretend anymore. From this moment it's just us. Whatever that means for the outside world. She smiled faintly, letting the tension she hadn't realized she carried slip away. Just us, she echoed. And for the first time in her life she felt entirely certain of something. That the life she had stepped into unexpectedly wasn't frightening. It wasn't temporary. It was real, and it belonged to her as much as it belonged to him. Marco stepped closer again, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then stay with me, he whispered. Not because you have to. Not because it's convenient. Because you want to. Sofia met his eyes, and in that quiet, unassuming moment she did. I want to, she said. And for the first time, the maid who had pretended to be someone she wasn't realized that she was no longer pretending. She was exactly where she belonged.